This is JoCAT, the home of the Creative Arts Therapy research community. Welcome to our podcasts. This interview accompanies an article by Ursula Schorn titled Phenomenology and Dance Therapy, the Body as an Organ of Cognition, which you can find on the JoCAT website. I am Anna Levey and I am speaking with Ursula from Germany about our shared experience of training in the Halprin life art process.
Probably even since you wrote the article, and certainly since we trained with Anna, there's been a huge explosion of, somatic or body-based acceptance of body-based ideas, particularly in the therapeutic world. But I think what was particular about her use was the inclusion of creativity in the, particularly in the movement and dance. There wasn't just a body awareness. It's how do I express that creatively or symbolically. And so I wonder if you want to talk a little bit about that, particularly in terms of where you might have taken the work since you wrote the article.
Yeah, I came from a training in dance and music, and I taught for many years at Salzburg at the Mozarteum, the conservatory, but I found it kind of limiting the way art was taught, and I needed something else. And through Anna, a lot of gates, doors were open to creativity, because she was weaving together all these creative arts.
Yes.
And the drawing is a very important part of it, how she was combining the drawing with the imagination, the kinesthetic, the psychokinetic visualization process.
Yeah.
This is a very, very, the heart piece of her work, from my point of view, to have the transition from moving and getting in touch with the inner imagery, and then to make it visible in drawing, and then go back to it, and then picking up the gestalt, whatever is in the foreground, and then moving it. So you go through all these changes, to all these transitions, and suddenly you find yourself in a process which really opened doors of a deeper, very deep understanding of who you are and what you're searching for. So the body, she freed the body from the stylized movements, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Dupla, her teacher, was very important for her. So the stylized movements was like freeing the body from these concepts and opening the channels from the sensing to the emotion. And this is such a basic phenomena she discovered, which made things flow in a wonderful way, and the processes were very creative, and the creativity in imagination and exploration and in performing were just incredible processes where all kinds of sources were integrated. Does it make sense?
It makes total sense. And what's interesting to me is that I came from the other end. So I'd had a psychological training, which I found very limiting because it was so cognitive. And so for me, going into something which was body-based and connecting the body and the emotions, and then bringing in the cognition, through the imagination. And I was interested that you connected. In your article, you talk a lot about Daniel Stern and talking about that sort of pre-verbal state of being intramodal, like being able to have a more globalized sense of one's experience. And I wonder whether you want to talk a little bit about whether you think that process, that the psychokinetic visualization process, how that connects with that more deeper knowing.
How this psychokinetic visualization process connects to a deeper level.
a deeper level of knowing that we have in ourselves,
right,
than the cognitive, than the,
and then the deeper understanding of yourself, and the body of cognition, right? So this process is, I just have to focus so you move, and then you have images to come, and then you make it visible, and then you have this encounter with the visible. Your own internal images are suddenly a partner for you, like a partner. So you correspond with it. But what I find very important is that you take a special aspect, a gestalt from this drawing, find a movement, and then you take it, give it to someone else, to a partner, you pass it on. And this is where Daniel Stern comes in for my end, that the affected attunement is coming in, that you don't just imitate, but you take it, you pick it up as a partner who doesn't know where you come from. And this is always very exciting. He or she takes it and she leads it without knowing. She allows herself to be led, and this doesn't try to find the meaning in it. This is such an important part. So she's just taking it, and the movement is guiding her, or the graphic figure is guiding her in a way that she can't know where it's supposed to go. And the not knowing is, from my point of view, a very important part, which is Merleau-Ponty, right? To really go into the not knowing and letting go of all the concepts and interpretations. And this Absolutely. Is where my search for, which is written down on the article, was leading me. I really wanted to find out what makes it so amazingly effective that people go into the not knowing and come out not crying about their horrible traumatic childhood, but they are touched and start like having tears in their faces, tears running down, but not because their life was so difficult and traumatic, but because they suddenly get in touch with the implicit meaning of their experience. And this is what I just came back from a big workshop I did in Poland in nature. And I saw these people suddenly just being there and crying out of joy. And this is the quality I was always missing in all my therapeutic trainings I had in bioenergetics and Reichian therapy and rebirthing and all this. There were always people crying and getting sick and getting lost, right? But here, a human being finds herself. You really find something which only I can find, not the therapist and not the other person. But the interconnectedness with another person, from my point of view, is making a big difference. That I have someone else, and I decide what do I assimilate and what do I let go. That's another very important part. So when another person moves my graphic figure in a way that doesn't resonate in me, I leave it. Yeah. And this, whatever touches me, I have the freedom to decide. And this is a very creative opening of the whole process. And me as a therapist, I'm just witnessing it. And I try to facilitate the process, but I leave as much untouched as possible in this process, because it has a very clear structure and a very clear intention.
Thank you. That was very well expressed. I want to talk a little bit, I would like you to talk a little bit about the working in nature, which was something that Anna really was very passionate about. Yeah.
So I took a group of Polish people from Switzerland, from Austria, and from Germany, and we all met in a beautiful, untouched nature, like in California. You know these beaches. And I tried to get them in touch with the inner nature, the breathing, for instance, and get an image of the nature. We are nature. This is what Anna says. We are nature, but we are not really connected with the nature inside of us. So they were beginning to feel the inner nature, the breath and the flow of the circulation, and the skin of the body and the bones of the body. And then they focused on one particular aspect, especially the breathing, and did a drawing of this the interior element of breath, of air. And then we went out to the beach, and their task was to explore this element. And I asked them to get together in small groups to support each time, to support one person who could express a wish. Could you please help me to get into the element of the air? Could you please run against the strong wind which we have had? Or could you please lie down on the beach and feel the air on the skin, or the sand on the skin? And they were just exploring these processes. And then we went back into the space, into the room where we met. And I asked them to imagine the resonance of nature inside of them. And they did another drawing. And from this drawing, they were chosen again one aspect, and the partner could move it. And there were moments where the tears were running, because suddenly they realized they really found some kind of healing quality in nature inside of their own body.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, it was really, and there were Polish people who didn't speak German, and we had a translation, but there were all these language problems. There were no problems, because they were mainly coordinating and communicating through the body.
Yes.
Through their drawings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and those languages are universal.
And the language is universal. And at the very end of the day, of one of these days, I asked them to find one gesture of what they've integrated through this process. And then everyone took on this gesture, and then it went around in a circle with a candle in the middle, and it was dark and very, very ritualistic, very, very quiet, and very internalized.
Yeah. And Anna talked a lot about ritual.
Yeah, she did. And she practiced the big ritual Circle the Earth. I was there in '85 when we celebrated it. And I am taking ritual a lot in my private practice with cancer clients, for instance. And I wrote something about it. And I will be going to Memorial State in Austria and do the planetary dance in one of those camps from the Second World War. Oh, so wow. This is another thing I'm doing. And I made contact with Anna when she found out that I was working on reconciliation work, Jewish and German, in San Francisco, with the therapist who was the son of survivors of Auschwitz. And then she said, Ulla, I want you to come and tell me about it, because this is very new, that what you're doing here. And this is how we connected. And then she asked me to come along with her to Esalen. So this was, on this level, we connected. This was very special, yeah.
Very special. I'm very moved by that. Yeah. Use of the work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Anna was so identified with America, with the United States, so she did this interracial stuff in the United States, which is very important.
Yeah,
but didn't really touch on the Jewish-German thing, which is, just an interesting thing.
Yeah. And this is where we connected, right? She said, Ulla,
Yeah.
tell me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think she probably realized perhaps that it was somewhere she hadn't been able to go.
Yeah. Yeah. She had not been able to go. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And she was always very honest about her limitations. She never pretended to be perfect, you know?
Right. This was a really strong part of hers. Yeah.
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 Really
And
very special.
yeah, we used to tease her a lot, you know, because she liked, you know, she liked just being an ordinary human being.
Right.
Not, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
A unique person. And she was so courageous that she stripped the dance from all the stylized movements, right? This was a big thing, and she was a wonderful dancer.
Yeah.
But she knew this doesn't lead where she wanted to go. She wanted to go immediately into the interior of the body and really get in touch with the feelings, but not feelings putting on and then dancing my sadness, but really letting it develop inside of me, right? In a totally different way.
Yeah. It was about expression. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And freeing the body from all these tamed and armor through the styles. And then suddenly when you do that, the body really lets go and the feelings can flow.
And I think that's why she encouraged people to come from all walks of life, you know, because I think she found that people who were trained as dancers found it the most difficult to let go of how their bodies had already been trained. And she would, you know, encourage them. And I think putting them alongside people like myself who had no training at all, you know, we would learn from each other. And I had all the psychological training, but none of the movement training.
Right. Yeah.
So I had to let go of that, you know, that part of my, you know, of going to my mind first. And I remember her saying to me, you've got a really strong body and really strong emotions, and it's about time you started using them.
That's
and
great.
It was the most useful thing that anybody had said to me.
Yeah. Yes. But when I left the training, she told me and us, now you have to study the theory and the background. Because when I arrived at the Institute, I had no idea what she was doing. I knew more. Daria was more clear to me than Anna. Anna was so open in her way to approach the body that sometimes we were totally overwhelmed. And what is she doing here? So this is what I did, and I did my master's in Lesley College, right?
Right.
And but the poetic part I find very important, and that's what Anna's saying too. That the poetic is really something which goes transcends the physical and goes to another level. This is where the transformation is happening very much in the language of in the poetic language.
So I agree that the poetic writing as part of that psychokinetic process is a really important use of using verbal language, but not in a cognitive way. So it's more connected with the imagination. And so, if you could talk a little bit more about how that kind of helps that intermodal process, which is also something that Stephen Levine writes a lot about. So the expressive therapist from Levey, I can see how it's a natural place for you to go after the Halprin work, because they work very much across modalities as well, rather than just staying within art or within dance movement.
Yeah, for me, it's a very clear intention to more and more leave the narrative aspect behind, and to go into the abstract quality, which I describe in the article, right? Or how it works, that you bring the movement directly onto the paper. So this creates different drawings than cognitive drawing, or even imagination has a different quality. But when you go into the movement, then you have the abstract form, and this brings people away from the narrative.
Yes.
But then at the same time, when the narrative is gone, my mother and my father, and then I had a horrible childhood, and all this is gone. Yeah, this is where the imagination is coming in, and this is where the poetic language is coming in. It goes away from the narrative, but at the same time, it's the essence you find, which really transforms the narrative.
Yes, it can take it somewhere completely new.
Yeah. And it's not a cognitive interpretation of the process, but it's going beyond the logical thinking into another realm of creation.
Beautiful. Yes, I agree. It's a lovely way of putting it. Yeah. And I think that's that, what I think is really interesting about the expressive therapies in general is that they help us to go into the unknown in a safe way. So I think one of the things that most people who have grown up in a Western framework find the unknown quite frightening. And yet if it can become somewhere that's beautifully surprising and that we can get curious about, it creates that possibility of going, being able to go with the unknown and to improvise. And I think, life is an improvisation. And that's something I think Anna helped me very much to be able to improvise and not know where it was going, and then have a wonderful, possibility of new things coming, and not to be frightened of the unknown. And I think that's a really important part of the therapeutic process, is to let go and allow that transformational growth.
Right. And how to guide clients into this place is the question. And for me, I always ask the question when I do these trainings, how can you create safety?
Exactly.
And there are so many tiny things, how you welcome everyone and how you really have an eye on different processes, how you don't set goals, you have to do this, you have to come up with a performance, but really allow the group to find its own process. And this is where the RSVP cycle comes in.
Yeah, do you want to talk a little bit more about that? It's a big subject in itself. Yeah.
The RSVP, this is what I try to teach in the last section of a training, 4-weekend training, that people develop the experience of co-creativity.
Yes.
So that there's the interconnectedness among people. And there were incredible moments. So I asked them, what is the theme now in the foreground here within the whole group? They come up with a theme, and then they verbally associate words to the theme. They write them down, words which are close and can be transformed into movement. And then they go ahead and they make drawings or symbolic drawings of this particular word association to this theme which they have had chosen as a group. And then these symbols are translated into movement. And from there, they create this, like a patchwork of all these different symbols, and come to a performance, which is incredible because it is very open. It's not a choreography. It's really a performance in the very moment with all the performance consciousness it needs. And there were incredible moments of interconnectedness, and different from what they might have planned in the very moment. They create something and experience what happens when everyone is open to connect with each other.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So that's a lovely example of using that that RSVP cycle process to allow a group to create together and to improvise and within a structure, you know, so it creates a container, and that's what you're talking about, that safety. And I think ritual is the same thing. Somehow, without sort of constructing something really deliberately, you create the environment or the circumstance in which people can feel collaborative with each other.
Right. And this co-creativity is something you need to learn as a therapist, to be co-creative with your client, right? In this individual session, to really be open. Where does this come from? And sometimes voices come, like in the workshop in Poland, suddenly the whole group was beginning. One person began to sing, and I said, okay, you can sing. And then something beautiful developed out of nothing. So you try to pick up whatever is there. Sometimes it's just a word. You say, okay, say words, or just exhale and find the color of your voice and of your breath. And there are moments happening which are a surprise to myself. It goes beyond my planning, right? It's really an open process.
It's going with, you know, and I think
you're going with.
It's one of those things. I remember, was Soto teaching when you were a student?
Soto, yeah.
So I always remember his improvisation classes where, you know, it's basically you're making a choice. So am I going with and keeping something, or am I letting something go? You know, there's constant choosing about what, you know, where is the impulse taking me? And that affect attunement you're talking about with the other, of what are we both kind of picking up on from each other, and what are we letting go of, and what are we choosing, and what are we not choosing.
And what I really try to, and I get the feedback, but I really always try to do is, I begin very much with the I. So what is mine? Where are my limits? Where's my space? To really create a feeling, I have my own space, I have my own limitation or boundaries. And then going to the you, I and you, like the principles of the creative process. And then always coming back to the I, and then going to the we, but that's what Anna points out, that the I is always the important part. So what do I take on from the other, and what is mine? What do I assimilate, and what I don't take? Right? And I think this is another idea of, this is really where the feeling of an experience of safety comes in. When everyone knows, yes, I do have my own space, and I do have my own feelings, and I do have I need a particular space around me, and suddenly something changes, and I take something on from the outside, I integrate it, or I say no. This is what Soto is doing, and this is a very important part of Gestalt, right?
Yes, and a very important part of, you know, what you were talking about with Daniel Stern, you know, the infant sort of individuating from that symbiotic relationship. So
So not a symbiotic, but and this is what is questioned anyhow, but this is I'm so amazed about Daniel Stern's research he did, right? That he really found out the abstractness of communication between in the first months, and this terminology, the abstractness, is what I point out, and this is where the narrative aspects really go into the background, and the abstract is the place of the unknowing, the not knowing. That's not about finding the meaning as soon as quick as possible, but to open the space and to go into, with the abstractness, into the implicit, and the implicit experience, the immediate experience really guides you into the cognition.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I'm reminded of what Daria called aesthetic responding, you know, as in that therapeutic process where you're allowing yourself to respond to the other aesthetically rather than cognitively or making meaning. You're just responding, you know, like you say, not mirroring, but what's coming from yourself
Responding,
in response. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Not imitating. Yeah.
Yeah. So is there anything else you really want to talk about from you know, from the basis of your article through to what you're doing now?
Yeah, I think I said most of it, that I am so amazed how much ease develops in the therapeutic process. When you leave out all the narrative stories and just go into the body and let the body speak, and the transformative, the change which can happen through this process of awareness, everything gets so easy and so lighthearted, and still has a depth which is amazing. It's only the problem that it might be frightening to many in the field of dance therapy, because all the analytical approach to the body is really gone, right? We don't need it.
It's not necessary.
It's not necessary. And the interpretation and the diagnosis and all that, you really empower the individual. That's what I see. And I think this is where the feeling of safety is happening.
Well, it's not pathologizing. You know, and I think that was a big thing that Sean McNiff brought into the field. Well, he identified it, is that we don't need to be pathologizing people.
Yeah. Apologizing. Yeah.
Pathologizing.
Pathologizing.
Looking for what's wrong. You know?
Yeah, right.
In this work, you're looking for what are our resources? What do we have that helps us to transcend what's wrong? You know, because we're all flawed. We all have trauma. We all have a history. We're all human beings. You know, we have things that aren't that, you know, functional about us. And yet we can still, you know, which I think is what Anna really showed me. In all her flaws, she still could be creative. She could still, you know, do this really innovative work without thinking she had to fix herself up. You know, like it's not a thing about fixing. It's a thing about what can I do with who I am? Developing, growing. Yeah.
Yeah. And being in the very moment and seeing what happens in the very moment. It's really great to share this with you. And I don't know, I have the experience that a lot of my colleagues don't really, those who are doing trainings in dance therapy don't really get this. It might be frightening even when you just go away from an analysis and body analysis and theories and all that. It doesn't go anymore, right? The phenomenology is really such a basic philosophy which shifts everything around. You really have to let go of all what you know about psychology, what you know about the development of a human being. And this is a totally new beginning from my point of view. That's my feeling. And I think I was searching for it. I went through all these different therapeutic processes and approaches. And I always felt, no, this can't be it, to punch on pillows and to kick your father through the room. It doesn't really change anything, right?
Yeah.
And that's not it. But a lot of people are afraid when you come with these statements. You don't need this. One movement and someone else takes it and I see something and I'm touched. That's where it is, right?
Yeah. And I think, one of the tricky things in terms of writing about this or even speaking about it is, and it's really what you say in your article, is that you have to experience it to really understand how it works, you know?
Exactly.
So that's kind of the frustration, is that it can be so simple, apparently simple, but unless whoever's involved is completely present, you know, it's not going to work. because it,
Exactly.
you know, that it requires that presence and that letting go, that surrender to the process.
Yeah.
And that's not simple to do.
Yeah, right. Yes. This is exactly the problem of the whole thing. You have to allow yourself to let go of all what you know about the whole processes and really be there. And then once you're there, and to guide clients who are traumatized, it takes a long time.
Yeah.
It's not a confrontation. Now I will confront my father. It's more feeling, okay, what is happening inside when I think of my father? I feel it here now. And then you move it and then you make it yours, right?
Yeah. And that's very important, that what's here now rather than what's a story about then.
But back then. Yeah.
And
that's what Stern says. Why did psychology always go back into the past instead of starting in the present? But this is, I just met another psychologist, who is teaching at the university, and she said, and Stern had a lot of problems. A lot of people attacked him. I didn't know that.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But yes, I think psychology was really built on this idea of, you know, going back and, you know, while yes, it's, you know, there can be some value in understanding our past, but it, you know, all we can do, you know, really, you know, I know Anna would really have said this a lot to us, is, you know, all we can do anything about is what we have now.
Yeah.
You know, who we are now. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
And how we, and I think the other thing that I think was really profound about, you know, the 5-part process that they taught is that, you know, those workshops you talk about where people are kicking things or throwing things or catharting all over the place, is that that would be the change level of the process they were talking about, but it's the growth is what they were interested in, what Anna and Dario were interested in. So yes, you can go round and around a million workshops and experience the change within the situation of the change feeling, that release.
Yeah.
And yet, unless it's in part of this creative process we're talking about, where somehow you transform it and make meaning, not cognitive meaning, but meaning in terms of understanding oneself, then that can go into growth, where it really goes into one's life and how one lives, you know, that life art process, that my art, my creativity helps inform my life, as well as my life informing my art. So it's that thing of how do I take that into my life, rather than just be in the workshop and have a big catharsis and feel a bit better in the moment, maybe, but not really have changed anything.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the 5th part, right? To
really
the 5th part,
take it
into the day-to-day life. Yeah. And the performance idea is a very different one. The distinction between choreography and performance, to have the performance really be an open process. Yes. Of course, you have your scoring process, but it's not a choreography, because it's not predictable what is happening. Yeah. It's what Larry Halprin was pointing out in the film, right? But it's the openness of the performance itself. So even in the performance moment, which creates a closure to a longer process, still it's open to what is happening at the very moment. Yes. For instance, when I did my mother performance, which you probably did as well, right? The mother performance.
Yes.
I told my partner, you have to run behind me, and then I will just go out to the deck. And what happened was that I was running and I was falling down, and he was falling on top of me. And this was the turning point. So you don't get up and say, I'm sorry, this was not what I planned to do, but this is it. And then to go with
this is what happened. Yeah.
So you can't run away from your mother, was the message, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't work. She is there.
Yeah. Right. She'll fall on top of you. Yeah. Yeah, I was actually getting goosebumps when you were telling me, because suddenly my mind went to all my mother, my father, my grandparent, like all those enactments, if you want to call them, which might be an easier word for people to understand than, performance or score.
Yeah.
They're like a drama therapy enactment of a relationship, and you give the other person an idea of the role, but anything can happen in the moment that helps illuminate, for you.
Yeah.
Aha, that's it. That's my response to this thing. This is my present response to what happened. Yeah.
Right. And this is the big challenge.
Yeah.
To really, yeah.
And also, I feel like we did such a lot of learning about, when we took part in other people's, when we were given a role in somebody else's enactment.
Yeah.
There was such a learning, particularly if you're training to be a therapist, where you take on a role for someone.
Right.
It's huge what you learn.
It is huge. And at the same time, if you overdo it, if you make it your own, then you're losing it. But at the same time, you can't just surrender to what's there, right? This is a very fine line to go. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is that thing of, particularly when we were at Sea Ranch, we would do these big scores that might last for days, but it might have started from a really small task, do this, go there, do that. And then these relationships would all be revealed within what would happen, what would unfold.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I spent a whole day with blinded with a blindfolding.
Yeah.
Right next to the ocean. But the whole day just closed the eyes.
Yes.
It was incredible.
Yeah. I did the same thing. And I actually I was in a time in my life where I was wanting to leave a situation, a relationship, and I had no idea what I was going to do next. So I said to someone, I'm going to blindfold myself and I'm going to walk on the edge of the cliff. Just make sure I don't fall off. That's your only job.
No.
But because it gave me the feeling, this is where I am in my life. I need to get comfortable with being close to the edge and not knowing what I'm going to do next. Yeah.
Right.
And I have to learn how to tolerate this feling. It was a really useful thing to do.
Amazing.
And I knew he would keep me safe. I knew he was, so it was a thing of trust in myself.
Right. Amazing.
Yeah. It was really useful. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had an opportunity with those, those relationships we'd built up over years to know, who's the person I need to help me do this thing, give them that role in the score.
Yeah.
Or give the whole group a role in my score.
Right.
Yeah.
And to really accept even those moments in life which did not work out, right? Because there's always a learning. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we could talk for hours, but we probably need to wrap it up because it's supposed to be a podcast and no one wants to listen to us reminiscing.
But I'm so glad to have met you here.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Thanks for listening. This podcast was produced by Amanda Levey and Vic Segedin, music by Kathy Manning. You can listen to JoCat podcasts through the JoCat website or the JoCat YouTube channel. JoCat is in the process of building up its podcast resource. If you have an idea for a podcast that would be of interest to other creative arts therapists, please get in touch through our website.